The Interstellar Trade Commission had a reputation for being the most boring institution in the known galaxy. This was intentional. Boring meant predictable. Predictable meant stable. Stable meant that 47 civilizations could move resources across 11,000 light-years of space without starting wars over who owned which shipping lane. And that was, when you thought about it carefully, one of the more remarkable achievements in galactic history. Remarkable enough that nobody ever remarked on it, which was exactly the point. Commissioner had run the Commission's human division for 19 years. She was 54 years old, precise, relentlessly organized, and had a reputation among the other commissioners for being simultaneously the easiest person to work with and the most difficult person to outmaneuver. Nobody had ever quite figured out how she managed both at the same time. She had not fired a weapon in her professional career. She had never commanded a military vessel. She had no combat record of any kind. She had, however, prevented 9 wars, restructured the economic frameworks of 3 collapsed civilizations, and once talked a warlord out of a territorial dispute by spending 4 hours explaining compound interest to him until he decided the long-term math made conquest not worth it. She was, by any reasonable standard, the most dangerous person in the Commission. Nobody had told the Syndicate this before they decided to make her their problem. They were not a civilization in the traditional sense. They were an economic entity that had grown large enough to field its own military, which was a distinction that sounded meaningful and was, in practice, largely irrelevant. Money and power had always been the same thing in enough places that the difference was mostly philosophical. They controlled resource extraction across 40 systems. They had their own ships, their own security forces, their own judicial system that operated primarily in their own favor. What they did not have was access to the Commission's trade routes. For 11 years, they had been applying for membership. For 11 years, the Commission had reviewed their applications and found procedural reasons to delay. Not reject would have caused a confrontation nobody wanted. Delay, the galactic bureaucratic equivalent of a door that is always almost open. They had finally lost patience. Their new director, a calculating and ambitious man named, had decided that the delay strategy was a negotiating position rather than a genuine obstacle, and that the correct response to a negotiating position was a better counterposition. He had acquired, through means his legal team described as aggressive asset acquisition, and everyone else described as theft, controlling stakes in 6 of the Commission's primary fueling stations along the outer routes. Then he had requested a meeting with Commissioner. He had expected negotiation. He had expected the careful diplomatic dance of 2 parties who both understood leverage and were feeling out how much the other had. He had not expected her to arrive alone, without legal counsel, without security, and to sit down across from him with a cup of tea and the calm expression of someone who had already finished the chess game in her head and was just waiting for the board to catch up. "Thank you for making time," said. Commissioner settled back in his chair with the ease of a man who believed he held all the relevant cards. "I assume you understand why we requested this meeting. You've acquired controlling stakes in 6 fueling stations," she said. "Stations that service approximately 30% of Commission traffic on the outer routes. You intend to use this leverage to accelerate your membership application and negotiate preferential route access." She sipped her tea. "Have I missed anything?" Blinked, he had prepared a presentation, a careful, staged reveal of information designed to build pressure gradually. "You've done your research," he said carefully. "I've known about the acquisitions for 4 months," she said. "We've been watching the shell company transfers since the first one. You're very good at that, by the way. The layering is genuinely impressive. Our financial forensics team had to go 4 levels deep on 2 of them." Was quiet for a moment. "Then you know our position is strong." "It's not bad," agreed pleasantly. 30% route disruption would be a significant problem for Commission operations. Repair timelines, rerouting costs, the political complications of explaining to 47 member civilizations why their shipping is delayed. Yes, it would be genuinely difficult. She set down her tea. "Would you like to know what would happen next?" "I'd be interested in your perspective," said. His voice was still confident. His hands, noticed, had become very still. "The Commission would invoke Article 7 of the Interstellar Commerce Protection Framework," she said, "which allows us to classify any entity that disrupts trade infrastructure as a hostile commercial actor. That classification triggers automatic sanctions from all 47 member civilizations simultaneously. Not negotiated sanctions, automatic ones built into the membership treaties. Your existing trade relationships, and you have several, I have the full list, would be suspended within 72 hours. She paused. You would also find that the 6 stations you acquired have a maintenance dependency on commission-licensed software that we would be legally required to suspend licenses for under the same article. The stations would become non-operational within about 3 weeks. The room was very quiet. You'd be hurting your own roots, said. 30% disruption for an estimated 4 to 6 months while we reroute and replace, said. Yes, it would be expensive and difficult, and our member civilizations would be unhappy with us. She looked at him steadily. We modeled it out. The Commission survives it. The Syndicate, cut off from all 47 member markets simultaneously, does not. Looked at her for a long moment. You came here to tell me my leverage doesn't work, he said. I came here to tell you before you used it, she said, because using it would be bad for everyone, including you, and I would prefer to find an outcome that isn't bad for everyone. She picked up her tea again. You want commission membership and preferential route access. You've wanted it for 11 years. The delays have not been arbitrary. There are genuine concerns among member civilizations about syndicate labor practices in 14 of your extraction systems, and those concerns have blocked consensus on your application every time it's come up. Those concerns are exaggerated, said. Some of them, agreed. I've read the full reports. About 60% of the documented issues are legitimate concerns. The other 40% is competitive lobbying from existing members who don't want your route access competing with theirs. She set down her tea. Here is what I'm proposing. You divest the 6 stations, clean transfer, fair market value. I'll have our office process it within 2 weeks. In exchange, I will personally broker a reform verification process for your labor practices in the 14 flagged systems. Independent verification, not commission-appointed. You can propose the verifying body. We'll approve it jointly. If verification passes, I will push your membership application through in the next review cycle. Stared at her. You would do that, he said slowly, after what we just did with the stations. You haven't done anything yet, she said. You acquired assets through legally questionable but not technically illegal means and requested a meeting. That's aggressive negotiating, not a hostile act. She looked at him evenly. I'd rather solve the actual problem than punish the symptom. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When left, he had agreed to the station divestment and the verification process. He had also, somewhat to his own surprise, agreed to 2 additional labor reforms that had not been on the original list. Reforms that had introduced so quietly and reasonably in the final hour that he had found himself agreeing before he had quite processed what he was agreeing to. His legal team reviewed the agreement afterward and found it was, on balance, fair, more than fair, genuinely in the syndicate's long-term interest. They were slightly unsettled by this. She gave us what we wanted, his chief counsel said. More than what we wanted. Why? Because she wanted us to have it, said. He was still thinking about the meeting. He suspected he would be thinking about it for a while. The membership, the route access, she wanted us in the system, inside the framework. Because inside the framework we're accountable to the same rules as everyone else. His counsel considered this. That's a better solution than the one we came in with, said. Yes. He looked out at the stars for a moment. Find out everything about how humans train their diplomats, he said. I want to understand how they do that. His counsel made a note. Nobody ever found a fully satisfying answer. The best explanation anyone ever managed was that humans had spent so long negotiating with each other, across languages, cultures, ideologies, centuries of conflict, that they had developed a particular skill for finding the solution that worked for everyone without anyone quite noticing it was happening. They had practiced on themselves first. As with most things humanity was good at, the galaxy had not seen it coming because it had been happening quietly, internally, for thousands of years before anyone else was paying attention. Commissioner filed a brief report that evening. 2 paragraphs. Noted the station divestment agreement and the upcoming verification process. Recommended the application be placed on the next review agenda. Then she went home and made dinner and did not think about it again. Just another Tuesday.